LT here again, and I want to discuss how perfection isn't impossible. It's misunderstood. Everyone has heard the phrase, nobody's perfect. It's repeated so often that most people never stop to question it. It sounds humble. It sounds reasonable. But very few people ever ask a much more important question. What does the word perfect actually mean? Because the modern understanding of perfection is not only inaccurate, it is fundamentally disconnected from the way the word was originally used, especially in the biblical world. Today, perfection is usually imagined as something impossible, a flawless performance, someone who never makes a mistake, someone who excels at everything all the time. But that idea didn't come from the original meaning of the word. It came from cultural distortion. If we go back to the roots of the word perfection, the meaning is very different. The English word comes from the Latin perfectio, derived from perfectus, which comes from the verb perficere. Perficere is made of two parts. Per, meaning completely, and facere, meaning to make or to do. So the original meaning of perfectus was simply this: something that has been fully made, something completed, something brought to its intended state. In other words, perfection originally meant completion, not flawlessness, not superhuman ability, but fulfillment of design. The same idea appears in the Greek language of the New Testament. When the word perfect appears in passages like Matthew 5:48, the Greek word used is teleios. Teleios comes from telos, meaning end, goal, or purpose. Something that is teleios is something that has reached its intended end, something mature, something complete. Again, the meaning is not flawless performance in every possible category. It is completion of purpose. Now compare that with the Hebrew Bible. One of the words translated as perfect is Tamim. Tamim means whole, complete, intact, undivided. It describes a person whose life is integrated and aligned. In Genesis, Abraham is told, "Walk before me and be Tamim." That statement is often misunderstood as a demand for impossible moral flawlessness, but that is not what the Hebrew word means. Tamim describes a life that is whole before God, not fragmented, not divided, not corrupted by competing loyalties. It describes alignment. This is why the Hebrew concept of sin also carries a very different meaning than many people assume. The word for sin in Hebrew is khata. Khata literally means to miss the mark, like an arrow that misses its target. So sin is not primarily described as permanent defect. It is misalignment, a deviation from the intended path, which means that righteousness, walking with God, is simply the opposite, alignment. And when a person is aligned with the Creator, the outward expression of that alignment appears as obedience. Obedience in this sense is not forced behavior. It is the natural result of alignment. When the heart is aligned, actions follow. But when people misunderstand perfection, they often replace this idea of alignment with an entirely different system of measurement. Human societies build hierarchies. They measure success by power, by wealth, by beauty, by talent, by status, by influence. But none of those things were ever defined in Scripture as markers of perfection. They are cultural measurements, not divine ones. A person may be wealthy and powerful, yet completely misaligned in their heart. Another person may be poor, overlooked, and ordinary by social standards, yet perfectly aligned with God. Human beings constantly compare themselves with one another. But comparison is not the standard used by the Creator. The biblical texts repeatedly emphasize something much deeper: the condition of the heart. In Hebrew thought, the heart, the lev, is the center of intention, will, and direction. And when the heart becomes whole, when it becomes undivided, the person becomes Tamim, wholeness. This is where the English word wholesome becomes surprisingly relevant. Wholesome comes from the Old English root hal, which means whole, healthy, and intact. That same root also gave us the word holy. Originally, too, holiness was connected to the idea of wholeness, not artificial or delusional perfection, but integrity of being. A wholesome person is someone whose inner life is not fragmented. Their intentions, values, and actions move in the same direction. But when people lose alignment, fragmentation begins. Desires pull in different directions. Loyalties become divided, which takes away from Elohim. Impulses override wisdom and discernment. The person becomes disordered and discombobulated. This is why biblical writers often describe corruption not simply as wrongdoing, but as distortion of the human condition. A departure from wholeness is a loss of alignment, which means you're out of order and out of place. But the modern concept of perfection has drifted far, far away from this ancient understanding.